Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to be exploring a task of just, well, an almost unimaginable scale. We're talking about taking the educational framework for one of the largest populations on the entire planet and completely, absolutely redesigning it right from the ground up. We aren't just talking about a few minor tweaks to a syllabus here. No, we're talking about tearing down old walls and laying entirely new blueprints for the future of learning in India. So let's unpack exactly how this massive transformation is designed to actually work.
But before we check out this new architecture, I want you to just reflect on your own schooling for a second. Think back to those late nights right before a big exam. How much of your time was spent endlessly repeating facts, kind of just trying to cram the periodic table or historical dates into your brain just long enough to pass a test? That traditional model, it relies heavily on rote memorization, a cycle of repeating without really absorbing the why. But the real world doesn't operate like a multiple choice test, right? So the really big question driving this entire reform is rote memorization finally dead? Are we moving past the era of the human flashcard? Section 1, the blueprint for modernization, overhauling a massive system.
Okay, let's dive into this. To really understand the architectural changes coming to this landscape, we have to look at the National Education Policy 2020, widely known as NEP 2020. This isn't just a subtle suggestion, you guys. It's a sweeping reform by the Indian Ministry of Education aimed at totally modernizing the country's learning systems. When we talk about a blueprint, well, the NEP 2020 is the master document. It outlines the structural engineering required to bring an aging infrastructure into the modern era, just making sure it can actually handle the intense demands of a rapidly changing world.
Section 2, the new academic structure, redesigning the timeline.
Think about it like this. When you're redesigning a building, you have to assess the load-bearing walls first. In education, that structural support is basically the timeline of a student's journey. Central to NEP 2020 is completely replacing the old, super rigid 10+2 mathematical model of schooling. That traditional framework, which strictly dictated exactly when and how students moved through the system, is being swapped out for something highly dynamic. We are essentially shifting the structural load of their education to actually match their cognitive development. It's a real game changer. Let's move to and see how this builds, because that traditional structure has been entirely replaced by a brand new 5-3-3-4 academic model. Step 1 is a 5-year foundational stage, and that focuses heavily on play-based learning in the earliest years. That's then followed by a 3-year preparatory stage building basic skills, then another 3-year middle stage introducing more abstract concepts, and finally the whole thing culminates in a 4-year secondary stage meant for much deeper multidisciplinary study. By breaking the timeline into these developmentally appropriate blocks, this blueprint creates a much more tailored journey as the student actually grows up.
Section 3, rethinking the curriculum, what students learn. So, if the timeline we just talked about is the framework, well, the curriculum is the interior design. And here, priorities are radically shifting toward holistic development. We're moving way beyond just textbooks. For instance, the curriculum integrates vocational training early on, which literally means a student might learn practical carpentry or coding right alongside their math classes. It also heavily emphasizes digital literacy, ensuring fluency in the language of our modern tech world. And it really champions experiential learning. Instead of just reading a paragraph about gravity, students are actively conducting experiments to feel its effects firsthand. It's really about building a well-rounded human being, not just a test taker.
Section 4. Changing how we learn, a pedagogical shift. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that we are circling back to that question we asked right at the very beginning. This blueprint demands a hard pivot away from treating the brain like a filing cabinet for rote memorization. Instead, it places a massive premium on critical thinking. It is no longer enough to just know the right answer. Students absolutely must understand how to arrive at that answer, how to analyze conflicting information, and how to actually solve complex problems. This pedagogical shift completely changes the entire dynamic of the classroom, from passive listening to active, engaged problem solving.
But hey, an amazing curriculum means absolutely nothing if the students can't actually access the material, right? To tackle this, the policy strongly advocates for enhancing accessibility through 2 main pillars. First up, multilingual instruction. In a country with dozens of primary languages, teaching in a child's mother tongue ensures that linguistic barriers don't block their ability to learn. It just makes sense. Second is the integration of technology. Tech isn't just another subject to learn anymore. It's a delivery mechanism. It's being leveraged to broadcast this modernized system into literally every corner and to every single student.
Section 5. Ready for the future. The human element.
So the crucial point is that all these structural changes and tech integration ultimately rely on the actual human beings involved. This framework completely redefines the roles of teachers and students. The teacher shifts from being a sage on the stage who just dictates facts to becoming much more of a facilitator and a guide. Simultaneously, the student transforms from a passive receiver into an active participant. By totally redefining this core relationship, the goal is to foster a highly inclusive, incredibly flexible environment, one that actually adapts to the needs of the learner, rather than forcing the learner to fit into a rigid, outdated mold.
The entire architecture of the NEP 2020 is designed specifically to prepare learners for 21st century challenges. It is a stunning blueprint for modernization, for sure. But, it leaves us with one final vital question to ponder. As these massive structural and pedagogical shifts move from the blueprint phase into real-world classrooms, will this newly flexible, critical thinking-driven environment truly be enough to conquer the unpredictable challenges of tomorrow? It is an absolutely fascinating question, and watching this monumental overhaul unfold is something you'll definitely want to keep your eye on. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer.